Hello and welcome to the Merton Vision podcast. My name is Joy and I am the working age outreach worker here at Merton Vision. I decided to bring you guys this brand new podcast. It's new for us here at Merton Vision and I'm super excited about it. This series is called This Is Why I Work. I will be interviewing 4 different blind and partially sighted people and they will be telling me all about the work that they do and most importantly why they do it. So make sure you stay tuned. Today I'm joined by another very special guest and she's going to tell you all about what she does, and she goes by Annalisa Dinnella. Welcome.
Thank you. What do I do? Why do I work? What do I do?
Well, Annalisa, we're going to get into that, don't worry. But first of all, before we get into, what you do for work and everything like that, my first question is to you, can you describe yourself in 3 words?
Are we talking appearance or just like as an existential being?
Everything, anything you want to include. Yourself,
Myself. Oh,
yeah.
God. 3 words. Okay. Driven, bouncy, and vague.
I like it. It's good to be driven and bouncy
and
vague sometimes, Annalisa, right, my next question is, because obviously we here at Merton Vision, we support people with various eye conditions living in Merton. So can you tell me a bit about your eye condition? What's it called? When did it start affecting you, etc.?
So my eye condition is called retinitis pigmentosa, and I was diagnosed when I was 14 years old. So I must have had fairly dodgy vision in my childhood, but I just didn't realise, and no one else did. But when I was about 14, my mum noticed that I was bumping into things a lot. And so then, it was a process of, joining the dots and figuring it all out. But then I just kind of continued completely unsupported. I wasn't given any sort of therapy, no access. I mean, I didn't even know what the word access was. I just had no choice. So I just sort of carried on bumping into things. And, I could see the blackboard, I could see stuff at school, I could read books, So basically, it only was affecting my peripheral vision, which was why I was, bumping into low-hanging tree trunks or falling over chairs and stuff. So I had like a little patch of quite functional central vision, and that continued for years. So I was really affected in terms of kind of movement and in terms of low light, but because I had such a good little central functioning patch, I really could just kind of get on with it. And so it was only kind of into my 30s that I stopped being able to read, print on the page. So the central, basically the little cells had eaten up all of my peripheral vision, and then they were starting to eat up the center. So now I've got a much, much smaller patch of central vision, and it's not particularly good, but it's good enough. So I can still, if I'm sat in the right place, I can still see the TV. So like I enjoy watching television still. And that's something that I kind of think, God, I'm really treasuring that, because I don't know how long I'm going to be able to get the visual information off the TV myself without needing audio description. But in terms of mobility, like just walking down the street, I need my cane, because if there's like variables around me, I will not see them. So it's a strange one really, because, in some ways I am really, really affected, and in other ways I'm not.
Yeah. And you're saying that your sight loss is still, it's progressive, so it's going to get worse over the years?
Yeah, so it's a degenerative condition, and the idea is that, my retinas basically slowly eat themselves over the course of my lifetime. But the doctors are completely unable to say when that's going to happen. And actually RP, my condition, is so variable. So you can get people who have lost all the vision by the time they're 30, but then you can get other people who are well into their 70s and still retain a functional patch. So it's really hard to know what's going to happen. I just have to kind of take each day as it comes. And they're you know, I go to Moorfields and they sort of shine a light at me and say, well, what do you think? So I don't really get much, you know.
You're diagnosing yourself, basically.
Yeah, totally. They're like, so how's your eyesight? Has it got worse? And I'm like, well, you tell me. They're like, well, you tell me. I don't know. And you know, some days because I get migraines quite a lot, and also bright light is really hard for me now. I will sometimes step out the front door and go, oh man, I can't see anything. You know, it's got really bad. And then 3 days later, I'll be okay again. I'll walk down the road and go, oh, I'm fine. So it's like an impossible mind game, really.
And I think that's really important for people to understand as well, that sight loss is such a spectrum. You know, some days can vary, let alone, you know, different people have different levels of sight, and things like that. So Annalisa, my next question to you is, and this is the juicy one, what do you do for work? Explain it to us listening. What do you do?
I am a script writer. So I write scripts for radio plays, radio drama, and for TV drama.
Lovely. Okay. And how long have you been doing that for, Annalisa?
About 12 years. So before that, I actually worked as a documentary producer for various independent production companies. I started off as a researcher, which was a job involving like just, you know, getting hold of people to contribute to documentaries or finding out information. So I was attached to lots of historical documentaries, and they'd send me off to the British Library, and I'd, you know, comb through books. So it was a job that actually was quite dependent on having quite functional vision. And as my vision became progressively worse, I realized I couldn't be doing that job anymore. And, you know, I think back then, so this was like, you know, I started work in 2000. So from 2000 to kind of like 2010-ish, that was not a very welcoming time in the world of media. So having a disability, you know, was not something that was, you know, welcomed in any way. So you know, the fact that I needed access and needed support, just, you know, it wasn't really responded to. So I kind of realized this is not the place for me to be. And I loved writing, and I was always the person who was tasked with doing all the writing of everything. So that's when I decided to switch to writing, which was kind of what I always wanted to do anyway, but also just presented much less in terms of access challenge.
Yeah. And do you feel differently now though? Do you feel like you could be a researcher now with you know, dip support in place?
Yeah, like I like to think things have, well, I don't like to think, I know things have massively changed, because there is an incredible drive now, and there are brilliant people out there, like, for example, Little Cog and what they call, there are various groups and organizations that are just out there making sure that there is access for any talented disabled person who wants to work in any role in the media. So I think if I could go back in time and sort of be that age now, I would get in touch with those groups, and they would say, here's a placement, here's this, here's that, how can we help you with your access needs? And I think absolutely there are elements of the job that I wouldn't be able to do, like if you genuinely have to go to the British Library and read a manuscript, you know, that is not something I could do, but there's a whole load of reading I can do, you know, using audio. But actually I do loads of research now in my work as a screenwriter, and then most of it does involve picking up the phone and speaking to people. Yeah. And I actually find that quite a lot of people who call themselves researchers rely massively on Google, and they don't get nearly as good information as if they just picked up the phone. So yeah, I absolutely think that if I was determined to work in documentaries, and I was entering the profession now, there would be a very bright future ahead.
That's good. That's good for people, I think, to know, in case there's anyone listening that does want to get into that. I think that, you know, at least they know that things have changed now, and there are a lot more things in place.
Yeah, and I just remembered the name of the really good group actually who really help in the media. They're called Think Bigger.
Okay, Think Bigger. Okay. Annalisa, you speak very, I would say, quite enthusiastically about, you know, what you do now as a writer. My next question is, do you enjoy your job? Because I think often we're in jobs and people don't actually think about Are they happy? Do they actually enjoy it? Maybe for you it'll be a bit different because, you know, this is something that you are very, very passionate about. But yeah, tell me about that. Do you enjoy your job?
Yeah, I'm absolutely, completely obsessed with it. I love it. I live for it. I breathe it. I wake up at 3 a.m. all the time, just thinking about. I really, really love it, and it's actually quite hard when you love your job that much because you don't realize how hard you're working sometimes, and you forget to take a break. I guess I'm an inherently creative person, so I have to be being creative, otherwise I'm unhappy. So in a way it can become a little bit too much and a little bit of an obsession because you still need to rest. But when I rest, I'm still doing creative stuff. Like it's sort of, yeah, it's a bit of an addiction really. But no, I absolutely love it. And it's really, really hard work, and it can be miserable at times. You get rejected a lot and it's really challenging. And you don't get that many moments of feeling like you've actually achieved something. So there's a lot about it that's really hard, but there's no other job I'd rather do.
And can I ask, as a screenwriter, are you self-employed or are you employed by different organisations? I think that's something that we should touch on.
Yeah, I'm self-employed.
Okay.
And so there are some years where I don't earn very much at all. And then there are other years where I'll earn like 10 times more. So it's really up and down.
So it's quite flexible. And again, I think that's something that sometimes, Annalisa, people can worry about is, you know, that the thing of, because being a creative, it's sometimes difficult to get, you know, full-time, you know, employment. You know, a lot of people are self-employed. And I think especially when you have a sight condition, maybe that is something that we worry about in case of, you know, how can we juggle this in terms of being self-employed, the uncertainty of it. You know,
absolutely, so I think you're absolutely right. And it's this is where we're at a really big disadvantage, because what you really need when you're starting out in something like this is a day job. And so, you know, of course, you know, we can't necessarily go out and get a job behind a bar or get a job as a waiter or something, which is kind of because you need a balance in your life. And when you're on your own creating in a dark room, you know, that can be very lonely. It can be very deflating. You do need to be out among people really as a balance. And it's really, really hard that the kinds of jobs that would be the perfect kind of, you know, the perfect thing to be doing alongside a more lonely creative pursuit are completely inaccessible. Well, most of them are, not all of them. So you have to be a bit, you know, you have to think around that laterally and just, you know, really think about, well, what can I do that gets me out into the world, that, you know, could maybe give me interesting relationships, interesting material potentially, but give me that steady income and flexibility and time so that I can, you know, do my creative thing on the side until I earn enough money to take off and that be my main job. I mean, I think everyone has that when they start off, but when you're disabled or visually impaired, it's that much more of a challenge.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that's really important that we speak about that, actually. Annalisa, my next question to you is, and I guess it was more centered on people that are employed, say like in an office job, something like that. But I think as a freelancer, I would really like to get your perspective on it, because I'm sure that there is stuff, you know, there are things that you've had to adjust. So my question is, what adjustments, if any, has your employer had to make your job more accessible? So in your case, I guess, what adjustments have you had to make to make your job more accessible?
So the big one for me is using an access worker. So I have applied for funding from Access to Work, which I received. They are actually quite good now at understanding the nature of creative work. And understanding that it's not, you know, that you have different needs at different times and that you generate different income at different times. So they took into account what I do and what I need, and they gave me funding for travel and for an access worker. So
is that through Access to Work?
That's entirely Access to Work, and that's something that I have put in place myself. So as a freelancer, I don't tend to ask employers to provide things that cost money. Because as a freelancer, that makes me less competitive, which is the whole point of Access to Work, is to say, it shouldn't be, I should not have to present myself as more expensive than a non-disabled person. So I will always go to them and say, here's what I've put in place to allow me to do this job. So I've got, I've got access to taxis and I've got access to an access worker. So if, for example, I have to be in a certain place at a certain time to go to a conference or a meeting or something, I will just say to the person organizing it, here are my needs, here's how I've met them. I will have my access worker with me at all times. She will make sure that, I know where the toilets are, and she'll make sure that I can go out and get food. And, everyone's just says, oh, that's bloody brilliant. How amazing. Thank you so much for sorting it all out for us. I mean, people are really eager to please, and they always say, please tell us if there's anything we can do. But actually, when you're freelance, if you say, well, I need you to pay 60 quid for my taxi, they are going to slightly, go white and go, oh my God. So that is the entire point as a freelancer of having access to work, is so that no one has to bear extra cost. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really, I've worked with lots of different people with different disabilities who sort of have to, ask employers to be more understanding or be more patient. Like, for example, if they've got someone doing interpretation or closed caption typing or that kind of thing, then they have to say to everyone, look, you need to speak a little more slowly. We need to take a break every 40 minutes so that my typist can have a break, that sort of thing. But for me, it's really, it's more the practicalities of how I get somewhere. I don't tend to ask people to print things differently, because I do that again on my end. So yeah, it's more about just mobility and getting places, and then just general understanding. Like, if I don't understand who somebody is, I think I kind of need people to just be a bit sensitive and introduce themselves and just understand that I can't necessarily see what's happening. But yeah, I feel like so far I haven't had any really difficult challenges in that respect.
Okay. So my next question is, Annalisa, and this is something that I feel like, again, is really important to think about for anybody that is currently in work or thinking of getting into work. How does working make you feel?
When I'm doing my job, I forget all about, the sort of the challenges of being disabled. Whereas when I'm socializing and being a mum and doing my real life stuff, I have to worry about those challenges all the time. So my job, in a way, kind of just allows me to just be me. I think that's a big part of it, actually. But also, yeah, it's just, how do I feel? I mean, I really am, unfortunately, am one of those people who just lives for their job. I just love it. So if I wasn't doing it, I would be really unhappy.
That's really interesting. It sounds like escapism for you.
Yeah, I think it totally is. Yeah, I think that's the case for lots of artistic people. Like, depending on what it is that they do, painting or music or whatever, you do just disappear into another world for a bit.
And I guess as well, because you are a creative and you're a writer, I guess it's quite, it's almost like, as you say, it takes you away from your reality, which sometimes can be challenging, as you say, when we're socializing or being mums. Everyone has their viewpoint and is comparing us to other sighted parents or whatever. But when we're doing our job, it's about the work that you're putting out there rather than being about you.
Yeah
Okay. My next question is, what advice, if any, do you have for somebody listening that may be visually impaired, thinking about getting into work, not sure what to do, or just not, maybe doesn't have the confidence to do what they actually want to do? Because I feel like that's another challenge as well. Sometimes as people with disabilities, we kind of, maybe we have an idea of what we want to do, but we are nervous to kind of, to tackle it. So what advice do you have for people that are thinking about getting into work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such an extra burden, isn't it? If you don't necessarily have a role model. I mean, the first thing I would do is try and find a role model, try and find someone who's lit the path before you and shown you how you can enter that particular field and how it's done. If you're lucky enough to have someone like that, then brilliant. But I think the sad truth is there aren't that many high profile visually impaired people doing exciting jobs, so you are going to probably be the first in a lot of these things, and that is a really bloody hard task, because not only are you trying to do the job, but you're also carrying the weight of the responsibility of being that, I call it the first penguin, like, when there's a load of penguins at the top of an ice shelf and the first one has to dive in before any of the others will follow. It's a really, really heavy burden, and it's stressful. And I know that just for when I'm the only disabled person in the room, in work situations, I don't realize it, but I'm carrying a lot of tension because I'm not only doing my job, but I'm also representing, the whole of disability. And that's hard. And it's hard when you're outnumbered, and it's hard when you're encountering ableism, but you're not sure whether to call it out, because if you call it out, then you're considered difficult. And, you don't want to make people uncomfortable because then they'll become defensive. It's just a real minefield. So yeah, I guess the most helpful thing when you're in that situation is to, that safety in numbers and that morale boost for having a group. In feminism, what do we call it? Like a micro system or something. It's like a little ecosystem of people who understand you and see you. And so it's, even if you don't have friends in that field or even friends with that disability, I find that disabled groups are incredibly helpful. So, it's about reaching out and finding other people who get it and gaining strength from them and sharing with them. So, in theatre, there's an amazing group called Grey Eye. And in TV writing, I was part of a group called the Writers Access Group that was run by BBC Writers Room, and we had a WhatsApp group. And actually, we share a lot, and we WhatsApp a lot about, individuals' different experiences. And even though it's people with completely different disabilities, we're actually kind of confronting the same stuff. So I would just say, really find that strengthening group of people to help you, because it is just really hard to do by yourself.
Yeah, I think, I totally agree. And also it's just, I guess it's a case of just knowing as well what you're doing it for, and knowing that it's possible. So yeah, that's interesting. Annalisa, we come into my final question for you now, which is, what would you say to employers that are thinking about employing someone with sight loss? What would you say to an employer that might be listening to this conversation now?
I would say that people with sight loss are born problem solvers. They solve 100 problems before breakfast. They are smart. They are driven. They will benefit your organization. They will change the atmosphere in your group. They will teach people so much about their own ableism. I've never met a visually impaired person who hasn't been a very positive, determined, constructive, creative person, because you kind of just have to be, just to like get through the day. So, I think don't be scared and don't be fearful of what you don't understand, because a lot of people's ideas of blindness and visual impairment come from these incredibly unhelpful, false stereotypes that are perpetuated in the media about, these helpless victims, or, people about to be murdered, or zombies, or, it's just portrayed so badly and so unhelpfully. So, educate yourself, find out some stuff. And in terms of, if you're secretly frightened, it will cost your organization more, it won't, because access to work exists for that very reason. So they're not going to be more expensive, and they're not going to, they're going to be quite the opposite of any imagining you might have in terms of not being capable. They're going to be more capable than you can imagine.
Awesome. I love it. Totally agree with everything you just said. Annalisa, thank you so much for joining me on the Merton Vision podcast. I really appreciate it. And let's just hope that there are employers listening to that, because I feel like that is really, really important. And I, by hook or by crook, will make sure employers listen to this.
I know you will.
Yes, I'm very determined.
Yeah.
So that is it for this episode of the Merton Vision podcast. Annalisa, would you like to tell people where they can find you if they would like to, extend the conversation or get in touch with you about your writing?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, I'm at Annalisa Din, ANNALISADINN. On Instagram, I'm Annalisa Dinnella. So yeah, and my agents, with Casarotto, so you can find me on the agents page.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening to this episode of the Merton Vision podcast. And this is why I work. If you would like to get in touch with us at Merton Vision, you can do that by calling us on 0208 540 5446. You can email us info@mertonvision.org.uk. Remember, tell everyone you know about the Merton Vision podcast.